But right now, we're very glad that Bruce Wergland has come to give the third part. I know he's gonna quote Psalm 46 again, and then we're going to sing about Psalm 46 when he's done. So wrap it up, Bruce. Let's give him a big welcome.
Can I get that picture, that photograph that I gave you guys? God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear though the earth gives way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though the waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her, she will not fall. God will be with her at break of day. Nations are in uproar, kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice, the earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us, the God of Jacob is our fortress. Come and see what the Lord has done, the desolations he has brought to the earth. He makes war cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow, shatters the spear, burns the shield with fire. He says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress." This is the third section of this psalm that I want to talk about today. And the verse that I want to key in on is, "Be still and know that I am God." And if you read in your bulletin this morning, there was a couple of short paragraphs, and all of them were about restlessness. And I want to contrast today our restless lives, our humanity, our culture, our individual qualities with what we are told to do in Psalm 46, verse 10. Be still. The picture behind you is where I've been sitting for the last 4 days. That's my canoe. That's my beach. That's the Fraser River. And not in this picture, but just to the left is Mount Shem. So if you can imagine driving from Chilliwack to Hope, and the tallest mountain on the south side of the freeway is Mount Shem. It's got snow on the top. And I have been taking in this incredible place for 4 days. My wife Cynthia discovered it. We've never been here before. It's a brand new campground, and we are loving it. In fact, we've already booked Labor Day weekend to go back for another 4 nights. And as I've sat and taken this in, there's been 2 things that have really captivated me in the last 4 days. One is contentment, and the other is confession. I've been thinking a lot about confession, and I don't want to talk about that this morning, but it's something that's been on my heart, this need to confess, to be part of this group, this collective. And what we do here together is we pray and we sing and we listen and we're quiet and we confess. And one of the things that really drew me here this morning was looking forward to being able to do that with you together. But I want to talk about restlessness, because if you're like me, and I'm pretty sure you are, you don't get to enjoy this or the equivalent of it for you very often. And when you do, you know you're somewhere special. But for most of our time, we're restless. Our humanity is restless. Since we were created, and I talked last time about Genesis 2, and the garden, and the water, and the time before that I talked a little bit about Genesis 1. And today I want to look more at Genesis 3. But if you know the story of creation, you know that those 2 trees, which I talked about last time, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life, brought the downfall of humanity. Because Adam and Eve made that choice to disobey and to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And we also know the story that Adam and Eve came from the ground. And the consequence of their sinfulness was twofold. They would have to work the ground and depend on their toil on the ground, and their bodies would die and return to the ground. So this notion of ground or soil, humus, there's a real paradox here in Genesis. There's a real paradox for you and I in how we interact with the ground, because truly, all of us depend on the ground. We will return to the ground. And so that exists. And when we look at Genesis chapter 3, there's some real interesting things that happen. But before we do that, how many people here have a vegetable garden? You grow something. Might be small, might be big. My vegetable garden, and if you've grown vegetables or if you have a vegetable garden, you understand what I'm talking about when I say this tension between you and the ground. Because you know from experience that what you want to grow sometimes doesn't grow very well, and what you don't want to grow grows very easily, whether that be weeds or the pumpkin you threw out last fall, and suddenly there's pumpkin plants coming up everywhere that you didn't expect in your garden, and you're not sure whether to dig them up or just let them go. In my garden right now, we planted one row of raspberries 3 years ago. We now have 3 incredibly huge rows of raspberries. The second 2 rows we did not plant. They just grew from raspberries falling on either side, and so we've had to trim them and train them into 3 nice rows so we can get between them. We haven't planted pumpkins for 6 years, because every fall we dump our pumpkins in one spot, and back they come the next year. And they take over one end of the garden whether we want them to or not. Our strawberries and blueberries, which we love, we've been trying to grow for probably 15 years. And they just won't grow the way we want them to. And yet we keep trying. And then, of course, you've got the weeds. And there's this constant tension for us and our garden. How do we get the soil to give us what we want? What do we plant? What works best? When do we water? All of those things. So if you're a gardener like me, you understand the tension with the ground, with the earth, with the soil. And so in our humanity, there's that tension, that restlessness. And Adam and Eve are asked to leave the garden. And there's 3 verses I want to highlight in Genesis chapter 3 that talk about this tension that creates restlessness, not only in them, but in you and I and all of humanity. The first one is verse 5. For God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. The words of Satan himself. Knowing good and evil. And Adam and Eve choose to eat that fruit, and they know good and evil. And I don't know if you've ever thought about this. What would life be like if you didn't know evil? If all you knew, all you saw was goodness, or maybe a lack of goodness, and you simply went, well, we need more of this. There was never that tension between, that's definitely wrong, that's definitely right. If you were here in May when I spoke, I think I talked about it then, where I said that I would love to be a thief, because I see opportunities all the time. And it pains me that I see them so easily. And I would love to steal, because it would be such a rush. It would be easy. I'm so confident and arrogant, I know that I wouldn't get caught. So the laws of the land would not deter me. The only thing that stops me from being a thief is the Holy Spirit living in my life, convicting me constantly that when I see these opportunities, I don't act upon them. And I just discovered a new one 2 weeks ago.
Watch the offering, people.
Exactly. Hold your purses tight. Wallets. I was going through the McDonald's drive-thru, and this has probably happened to you if you like fast food. You've got the wrong order. And so you're on your way out, and you look in your rearview mirror, and there's 10 cars behind you. You can't back up. Do I go inside, or do I drive back around? Well, it just so happened that the lineup behind me was only 2 cars. So I whipped out and drove all the way around, and the new drive-thrus have created a perfect opportunity for you to be dishonest because they have 2 lanes to order, and then they funnel into one to pay and pick up. That's just happened in the last few years. And when I went around, one lane had a car in it, and the other lane was empty. And so I went through the empty lane. Well, when I got up to the window, guess what they were going to give me? The other person's meal. They were holding it out the window to me. Here you go, sir. And everything in me wanted to go, thank you very much. I got 4 kids, they're hungry at home, I'll take that right off your hands. They would have never known, or once they'd figured it out, I would have been long gone. Or, if I wasn't up for a full meal, when I do get to the window, I tell them, you've made a mistake with my order. Oh, what did we miss? Well, I'm missing 3 Big Macs, 2 drinks, I could have asked for anything I wanted. And I hit another opportunity to be dishonest. And I saw the evil, I saw the dishonesty in the intent of what I was thinking. And part of me wanted to embrace that. And as I left McDonald's, I was, again, why do I see that evil so quickly? Imagine if there was no good and evil, but only good. And from that disobedience, all of humanity wrestles with that. Every single person here today, there's something in your life. For me, it's McDonald's and stealing. For you, it's something else where you're constantly going, I see it, but I choose not to embrace the evil. But it still exists. And there's that restlessness, that tension that we're always struggling with in our humanity. The second verse I want to highlight is what happens to Eve and women. It says in verse 16, to the woman he said, I will make your pains in childbirth very severe. With painful labor you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. Now, there's all kinds of things in there that I'm sure as a woman, you're thinking, I could really do without that. The childbirth, my husband ruling over me in some way, or however that relationship looks, that you complement each other in your relationship or your marriage. If you're a hardcore feminist, maybe you don't want anything. You just want to be equal. But there's that tension in family now. There's that tension in marriage. And I know all about giving birth to children. And I've told you stories about my wife giving birth to our firstborn, and I'm not going to go through all the gory details of that again. But I watched her, for my daughter Allie, for 60 hours try to give birth naturally to that baby. And in the end, she had a cesarean section. But I remember watching, and that's all I did was watch her go in and out of labor as they induced her, and thinking to myself, this is really how it has to be? And I know it's not that way for every woman. That tension in our families, in our marriages, because of the sinfulness of humanity. And then the third verse for men, for Adam, by the sweat of your brow you will eat the food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you will return. That tension of we have to work. And the restlessness that comes with working. I don't know if you remember the day, I don't, the day that you realized as a young person that you were going to have to work the rest of your life. I don't remember a moment when that happened to me. It might have, but I don't remember it. But I see it in my children. My daughter Allie is just graduated from high school, and she got a car, and this summer she's having to pay for an insurance, buy gas, and I can see it in her body language and the way she talks, that she's come to this realization, there's no going back. She doesn't even have a full-time job. She's working for the summer. But she recognizes that in her journey to get a job, going to university, owning a car, working in the summers, she is moving in one direction and there's never a chance to go back. She will have to support herself, pay for her school, put gas in her car, pay for an insurance, and all kinds of other things that come with being independent, an adult, being responsible. And she's realizing very quickly that tension of having to work to support yourself. And sometimes she really doesn't like it. In fact, I borrowed her car to come here this morning, and the very first thing that came out of her mouth was, "You're putting gas in that car." Because she knows the cost of a drive now. And she thinks twice before she buys something or goes somewhere because she knows she's paying to fuel that car again. And there's been this change in her way of thinking because she knows she's on a road that she will have to work, have a job, be independent, and support herself. That restlessness in our humanity, in our work, in our family, in our marriage, in our understanding of good and evil, all because of disobedience towards our Creator. But there's a second type of restlessness that I want to talk about this morning, and that's in our culture. 3 weeks ago, I was over in Victoria with my father, the day before Father's Day, and I went over, just a quick ferry ride, and we went out for lunch. And he took me to a restaurant called the Blue Mary Restaurant. I'd never been there before. It was a house converted into a restaurant. Really unique place. You could see where they had knocked down the walls of the bedrooms and just kind of opened it up. And in the middle, there was kind of a bar lounge. And then all around, there was seating. And there'd be windows. You can see where a balcony used to exist, and now it was part of the restaurant. And we walked in, and there was one guy, about 55, it seemed like he was on his own at the time, serving the whole restaurant. And he wasn't walking, he was almost jogging. He was kind of doing one of these back and forth, and he had this personality that was priceless because he would come by a table and hardly stop and say, "You still good? Excellent, thank you. Are you ready for your bill? Good, here we go." And he would just keep moving, hardly stop. And at first it seemed like he was the rudest, worst server you'd ever seen. But as you were there, you realized they were overwhelmed with people. And he could get away with this just because of who he was. He was still friendly and brought you your food. And so he brought us to a table and quickly whisked away to somewhere else. And then over the next few minutes, he came back with menus and water, and he would kind of talk over his shoulder as he was leaving your table because he had to move somewhere else. So when it came time to order, you can imagine what that looked like. No pen or paper, and he just kind of briefly paused your table. "What do you want?" My dad said, "I'll have the halibut wrap." I said, "I'll have the steak sandwich, and I'll have it with a salad." My dad said the same, and off he went. We chatted for a while, and he came back with the wrong orders. I mean, they were close. He gave my dad a halibut burger, and I got my steak sandwich with fries instead of a salad. And my dad looked up at him and said, "This isn't what I ordered." Now, what would you do in this situation? Okay, I've kind of given you the context. They're busy, he's overwhelmed, he's kind of floating around, not being too precise. Would you have kept quiet and just been content with what came, knowing what's going on in the restaurant? Would you have negotiated something? Or would you have dug in your heels and said, "I'm not eating this. Please take it back and bring me what I ordered"? We're going to vote here. One finger says you just be content, you wouldn't say a word. 2, you would negotiate, maybe at the end with the bill, or say, "I'll eat this part, but bring me a side salad." Or 3, you're digging in, you are going to pay good money, you get what you want at a restaurant. What would it be? Show me. 1, 2, or 3? I see lots of 1s. No 3s? Are you, is that she had 4 fingers up. I thought, oh boy. So mostly 1s and 2s. Very interesting. No 3s. You're good Canadians.
That's 3.
That's you said 3? Oh, I missed you. You were the only. Were you 3 as well? Okay, go ahead. Yeah. Okay, good. I like that. What happened next is none of your options. Because when my dad said this isn't what he ordered, he said, I ordered the halibut wrap. This guy didn't skip a beat. You don't want the halibut wrap. They make the halibut wrap with all the leftover pieces that fall off the halibut burger. This is way better. You're going to love it. Trust me. And he was off. There was no chance to negotiate or refuse it or anything. And my dad and I looked at one another, and we started eating, and we enjoyed what he brought, and our conversation carried on, and we were content just to eat what was given to us, despite the mix-up. At the end of the meal, he came back, and he said, how was the halibut burger? My dad said, it was actually pretty good. He goes, I know! Things happen for a reason. You make a left turn or a right turn, you don't know where this is going to lead you. And that's how he left us, with this assurance, not only that he knew best, but that this was all meant to be for a reason, and we should not even consider what would have happened with the halibut wrap. Since that meal, I've thought a great deal about not just eating in a restaurant, but I think a restaurant is an excellent example, but that restlessness we have in our culture. I don't have time. This is the wrong thing. Eating to consume food, like when I go through McDonald's drive-thru, rather than eating to share a meal. There's this restlessness. We want to be productive. We want to respond. We're looking ahead into the future. We don't even like to sit in silence. We want that silence to be filled. There's a restlessness in us. Probably the best example where I see this in our culture is eating with a phone. That phone beside you. And I have these conversations with my children all the time. They know they're not allowed to have that phone at the meal. Because it just perpetuates this restlessness. Who's going to call me? I need to see something. Their friends will come over, and they don't know that that's not part of what we do in our house, and they'll have their phone there. And my comment to them, at least recently, is, are you going to eat that phone? Is that edible? And they, what do you mean? Well, why would you bring it to the table if you can't eat it? And they quickly hear the sarcasm in my voice, and without me making any more comments, they just kind of put it away or take it and put it somewhere else. But there's that restlessness that what is before us, the meal, the people, the time allotted for that meal, isn't enough. We need to bring more to it. And that comes from our culture. The last thing I want to talk about is the restlessness we have in ourselves. We want to be known. We want to succeed. We want to achieve. We want to have a relationship. Maybe we want to get married. Maybe we want a particular job. Maybe we want a deeper friendship with someone we know already. That's part of who we are. All of us are like that. Grade 4, Colwood Elementary, 1977, I guess. Mrs. Moore, my grade 4 teacher, announced to the whole class, tomorrow you're going to come to class and you are going to have the meaning of your first name to present to the class. And when I call the roll call to see who was present, you are going to say your name and its meaning. Okay, fair enough. Went home, found the meaning of my name, came back the next day, and she started calling out names, and it was going around the room. And people were saying these incredible meanings like beautiful eyes, breath of the valley, or my best friend beside me, his name was Grant. And when his turn came, Grant, which means great. And I'm like, oh no, what's happening here? These are really awesome names and meanings. And finally she called out Bruce, and I quickly said, from the bush. And she said, could you say that a little bit louder? From the bush. Could you slow down and say a little bit louder? My name means from the bush. I'd made it through that. Never again would I have to be humiliated like that amongst my peers. And then just as she finished the class roll call, she announced, for the rest of this month, whenever we take attendance, you will give the meaning of your name. And so I endured it every morning for an entire month from the bush. We want to be known. And sometimes what we're known for maybe isn't what we're after. Maybe we have a reputation. Maybe there's something about us that we're not happy with. But nonetheless, there is this restlessness in us that we want to be known. And it's probably not known by our name, although that identifies us for our entire life. But we want to go beyond that, and we want to be known for who we are, what we love, what we want, maybe what we fear. But we want to be known, and we wrestle with, who do I trust to make myself known? Is it my husband, my wife, my child, my boss, my neighbor? How do I allow myself to be known by them? How much do I give up? How much do I reveal? And there's that constant tension or restlessness. It's part of who we are. It's part of our culture. It's part of our humanity to wrestle, to want to move or find more or fill the space or understand. But Psalm 46 verse 10 says, be still and know that I am God. Let me read that to you from a couple of other translations that I think say it even better. Strong's New American Standard Version. Cease striving. Stop! Cease striving and know that I am God. The Amplified. Let be and be still, and know, recognize, and understand that I am God. And finally, from the Message, attention all. Actually, let me jump down. Step out of the traffic. Take a long, loving look at me. Modern day cultural language for you and I. Step out of the busyness of life that you're involved in. Try and let go of that restlessness. Once in a while, we get glimpses of this. We experience it in our life. Whether we're camping, whether we're watching a child play, open a gift, whether it's sitting across the table from someone we really care about and enjoying a long meal with them, we get glimpses of stillness and contentment. And Psalm 46, verse 10 says we need to seek that. We need to strive after that. We need to be reassured. We need to trust that when we are still and we seek God, we will know our Creator. At the end of this psalm, if you've been here for the last 2 times I've spoken, there is a Hebrew musical term called Selah, which means to cease, pause, reflect. And there's a Christian group called Selah, and I've played 2 songs from them before, and I want to close with another song by this group. It's called Be Still.
Be still, my soul. The Lord is on your side. Bear patiently the cross of grief or pain. Leave to thy God to order and provide in every change. He faithful will remain. Be still, my soul, thy best, thy heavenly friend. Through stormy ways leads to a joyful end. Oh, be still, my soul. The waves and winds still know His voice. Ooh.